Okay, so I believe we're...
Good.
So I believe we're live now. Everything's up and running. So welcome everybody joining us online. Welcome to Padmavajra, to our room, and welcome to our Dharma Day Festival. My name's Padmavajra, and I'm here with Padmavajra, who's going to give us a talk this morning, and I'll introduce Padmavajra more fully in a moment. We've decided to make this Dharma Day Festival open to everybody, so I don't know who's out there watching. I know a few people because we've heard some names, but I'm aware that some of you watching might never have been to Padmaloka before. So just to give you a sense of where we are and what it looks like around us, I'm just going to ask Arvid, who is our cameraman for this morning, to pan around a little bit and to show you the shrine room here at Padmaloka. So you'll see that we're surrounded by all different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the community. Don't confuse the two. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are the paintings, the rupa here, all of it done by Loka, our good friend. And with the community there are 16 of us living here at the moment. So you'll see most of us too. Hopefully, some of the community have shifted themselves out to the back for a better view. Sure, you can smile if you wish. Okay, so this is us in the shrine room here at Padmaloka, and it's great to have all of you with us. As we said, the shrine room of our Dharma Day Festival up to everybody, or as many people as possible. And that started this morning with our morning. Apparently we had something like 65 people join us for meditation this morning. I've since looked at the YouTube video and there were 180 views. So that means that 120 people have since had a look at the meditation, an extra hour in bed, which is cheating. And for this session, how many people have we got now watching?
Just about 170.
Okay, fantastic. So about 170 people online somewhere, perhaps in different countries, different parts of the world, all coming together to join us here in the shrine room for Dharma Day talk. That's fantastic. So we do have a full program. This question and answer session, and this afternoon. Okay, quick sound check.
Quick sound check. Okay, let's see if that works.
Okay, I'll keep talking.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that you heard, but it was just a quick recap of the program for today. So we've got the talk and the question and answer session now. Then at 4 o'clock this afternoon we'll be having a meditative sutra recitation, and then at 8:15 this evening, sevenfold puja. I'm getting the sign that people can hear us now, so that's good. So that's the program for the day, and do come to everything. Have a full day retreat. Come to some of the events if you can just make some of the events. Everything will be live streamed on YouTube. Everything is without charge. You don't have to book anything. You can make donations. Donations are welcome. And Satyakirti is going to say something more about how to give to Padmaloka after the talk. So he'll say a bit more about that. So just some practical points. We'll have the talk, as I say, and then we're going to have a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back for a question and answer session and look to finish at about 12:30. So with the question and answer session, this is an opportunity to ask Padmavajra some questions about his talk. So you can send in questions during the talk itself and at the start of the break, and then we'll collate them during the break, and then I'll be asking him questions later on. So do put your questions to him. So that brings me to introducing Padmavajra and his talk. I think I just want to thank Padmavajra first of all for agreeing to give the talk this morning, because as soon as we suggested having an all-day festival, he was quick to offer to give a talk. And I find this with Padmavajra, that he's always very quick to give, and when he does give, he gives very wholeheartedly and very fully. So a real exemplar of generosity. So I just wanted to thank him first of all for agreeing to give the talk for us this morning. But I just want to rejoice more fully actually in Padmavajra's generosity. So I think he is somebody who, as I say, is an exemplar of giving. And first and foremost, he's given his life to the Dharma. So he encountered Triratna at 17, was ordained at 19, and has lived a very full life in the order. So it's over 40 years now, I believe. And that life in the order has taken him from Brighton to different parts of London, I think to 2 spells living in India, helping to start the movement up in India and establish things there. And perhaps we've got some of our Indian brothers and sisters watching who might remember Padmavajra from that time. And since his time in India, Padmavajra's been here at Padmaloka, I think about 30 years now, living here and working on the ordination team. So he's somebody who's always given very fully in that sense, and holds a lot of responsibility, I think, so not just as a pillar of the ordination team for all those years, but also Padmavajra as a private and public preceptor. He's the overall men's mitra convener for Europe and the UK, and also president of a centre. So he does hold all these responsibilities, and it's not about status for Padmavajra. I know that he often talks about holding those responsibilities in the sense of being able to help develop and increase the flow of spiritual friendship, kalyana mitrata, between people. So that's one of the ways in which he sees those responsibilities. And I think on the subject of friendship, Padmavajra is again very giving as a spiritual friend, and I can speak personally in that sense, having benefited immensely from Padmavajra's friendship, his encouragement and support, but also his good humour and company and affection as well. So he's just a very, very good spiritual friend to me and many, many people. And lastly, I just want to rejoice in how Padmavajra gives the Dharma. So I know that he really values learning and cherishes learning and having a clear understanding of the Buddha's teaching and how to put that into practice. And not only does he value that, but he really shares that. So he gives that very thoroughly, particularly through giving talks like the one we'll hear this morning. And there must have been thousands of talks from Padmavajra over the years. And one thing I've noticed is that Padmavajra gives talks particularly at times when they're really needed. So I remember just after our teacher died, after Sangharakshita died, I think it was the day after, Padmavajra was due to give a talk in Mid-Essex, and he still gave the talk. And not only that, he rejoiced in giving the talk, and you could tell he felt that that's what Bhante would have wanted for the Dharma to be shared at that time. So I drove Padmavajra to Mid-Essex, and he gave a fantastic talk there that night. And similarly with the pandemic and the lockdown, again, as soon as we went into that period, Padmavajra gave this talk on going for refuge in a time of fear, and it's had 6,000 plus views now on YouTube. So it's obviously something that people wanted and people needed, and Padmavajra could give that. And since then he's given this whole series of talks on the Bodhicharyavatara, and he's now giving this Garland of Red Lotus Flowers series of, I think, about 50 talks. So just constantly giving the Dharma through talks, sharing that with us. So again, thank you, Padmavajra, for all that you give, but particularly sharing your understanding of the Dharma with us, being such a good spiritual friend, and most of all giving your life to the Dharma, and therefore by association giving your life to all of us. And thank you for agreeing to give the talk this morning. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
sisters and brothers in the Dhamma, Namo Buddhaya, Jai Bhim. Well, I'm really delighted to be here this morning in the Padmavajra Shrine Room to celebrate and honour one of the great Buddhist festivals, one of the three main Buddhist festivals, the festival where we mark what's known as the Dharma Chakra Pravartana, the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dharma. And I want to dedicate this talk to my teacher, my spiritual friend, Bhante Urgyen Sangharakshita. I want to offer it to him because I feel an overwhelming debt of gratitude to Bhante for all sorts of reasons, not least because he has introduced me like no other to the Buddha himself. Listening to Bhante talk about the Buddha in so many Dharma talks, in so many seminars, so many personal conversations, I've felt really introduced to the Buddha. Sangharakshita has tremendous love and devotion and faith towards the Buddha and tremendous knowledge of the life and the teachings of the Buddha from the earliest times. I've just been going through a wonderful seminar that's being edited by Vidya Devi and Devan, which I hope will be one of the complete works on the Udana seminars that Bhante did. And it's just magnificent the way he kind of imagines himself, as it were, into the time of the Buddha, and the Buddha becomes vividly alive. So this talk would not be able to be given without my teacher. May blessings be upon my teacher, and inspired by the Dharma, may I meet with you again, Bhante. May I be reborn again as your disciple. Padmavajra, in that very generous introduction, mentioned how young I was when I got involved in the Dharma. And I remember one of the earliest Buddhist books that I got hold of. There weren't many Buddhist books in those days, in 1974. But one of them was a collection, a Dover reprint called Buddhist Suttas, translations from the old Sacred Books of the East series, in this case by T.W. Rhys Davids, the great scholar, early pioneer scholar of Pali Buddhism. And there was a sutta, a discourse called The Foundation of the Kingdom of Righteousness. The Foundation of the Kingdom of Righteousness. Oh, that's a bit weird. That's a bit biblical, a bit kind of religious. Of course, it was his translation of the Dhamma Chakra Pravartana Sutta, the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dharma. And of course, he'd rendered it as the foundation of the kingdom of righteousness. Dharma can be translated as righteousness. It is truth, it's reality, but it's also the ethical ordering of things. But he translated it or rendered Dhamma Chakra Pravartana because the chakra, is a symbol of royalty. It's a real symbol of sovereignty. You have in Indian mythology the Chakravarti Raja, the king who is the just king, who rules the society, rules the worlds, even rules the universe according to great moral principles. And the Buddha, taking hold of this symbolism of the Dharma Chakra, the Dhamma Chakra, is really saying, really announcing that he is now, in communicating the Dharma, he is establishing a new kind of kingdom, a new kind of order, an order that acknowledges no borders. There are no borders, there are no nations, there are no distinctions between anybody. There is no caste, no class, no race, no nationality. The kingdom of the Dharma is for everyone, and the kingdom of the Dharma is not spread through force, through power, through violence, through the sword, through weaponry or any chicanery or anything like that. The kingdom of the Dharma comes about through the communication of the Dharma itself, through the communication of the truth, through the communication of the truth with love, through the communication of the truth to individuals. The communication of the Dharma occurs through befriending individual human beings. It's about rousing and encouraging the deepest possible potential in individual human beings. What the Buddha is doing with the Dharma chakra, the turning of the wheel of the Dharma, is really rousing the potential for Buddhahood of other people. He is communicating with Buddha communication, Buddha Vachana, Buddha speech, which is also the Amata Vacha, the speech that comes from the deathless to arouse and to awaken individual people, universally, to realize that Dharma for themselves. In this sense, one could argue that Dharma Chakra Pravartana Day, the day in which we celebrate the turning of the wheel of the Dharma, is perhaps even more important than celebrating the day of the Buddha's enlightenment, which we celebrated so many months ago. Because with the turning of the wheel of the Dharma, what we're celebrating is that the Dharma has communicated to others. It has transmitted to other individuals. It's transmitted in the sense that they have realized to some extent what the Buddha has realized. Others have got hold of it, understood it, as he has realized it and understood it. So this means that the Dharma, that enlightenment, that Buddhahood is not personal. It's not just personal to the Buddha. It's not some eccentricity of an individual. It's universal. It's for each and every one of us. So this is an incredible moment in history, an incredible moment not just in Buddhist history, but in the whole of human history. It's not that the Buddha had not spoken to people before the Dharma Chakra Pravartana, the turning of the wheel of the Dharma. He had. Not long after his enlightenment, one of the earliest stories is an encounter with a Brahmin from the Hunkara Jati, the caste of Brahmins who have faith in the mantra Hum, who was known for his carping and arrogant nature. That's what the sutta says. And this particular Brahmin wants to know, he sort of finds the Buddha in the jungle meditating after his enlightenment. He wants to know what makes one a Brahmin, what makes one of the highest caste, what makes for the superior man. And the Buddha's answer is unequivocal. It's nothing to do with the caste that you're born into. It's all to do with your moral, spiritual qualities. It's all to do with whether you know the truth and whether you behave particularly without conceit, without egotism. That's what makes the superior person. Nothing to do with the privilege of being born into a particular community. And this is a very, very significant moment. It shows that enlightenment and the Buddha's teaching has an immediate social, perhaps even political impact. The Buddha's enlightenment cuts into the social and political arrangements, or the religio-social arrangements of Indian society. So in other words, a Dhamma revolution also arises with the Buddha's enlightenment. And then there was another person who he meets on his way to communicate the Dhamma to his 5 bhikkhu friends. We'll hear about those a bit later on. This is a very, very interesting moment, I think, in the Buddhist texts. The Buddha is walking along the high road from Eruvela to Benares, to Varanasi, Kashi, the ancient city of Kashi, to go to the deer park, to communicate the Dharma. And you have to understand, the Buddha would have looked amazing. The Buddha would have looked amazing. I don't mean he would have looked like he looks in Buddhist iconography with sort of lemon-coloured robes, all neat and nicely pressed, and sort of pinky skin that you see in some representations, or even gold skin. I mean, gold is the archetypal colour, isn't it? Something else going on there. No. He probably would have been quite dark, because the Buddha lived outside under the sun, and he's before his enlightenment he was doing a lot of austerities, so his complexion would have been quite dark. Some people might find this a little bit alarming, but no, that would have been the case. And he would have been wearing discoloured clothing, just ochre-coloured robes, discoloured with mud, but he would have looked amazing. His senses calm, his faculties bright, moving with this wonderful purpose, because he's definitely decided to communicate this Dhamma. He's had a realization that it will be received. It can be received if he communicates it. So he's intent on communicating this Dhamma that he's realized. And he's seen by a naked ascetic named Upaka. And Upaka, he thinks, the ancient Indian equivalent of, wow, who's that? Not just who's that, what's that? What is that? Is that a man? Is that a yaksha, a kind of tree spirit? Is it a god? Who is this? What is this? So he goes to the Buddha and says, well, friend, you look really special. You look really serene and bright. What are you? Are you any of these things? A god and so on and so forth? Or, according to another story, who is your teacher? What's your training? He wants to know all about it. And the Buddha's response is incredibly powerful. In one account he says, all the conditionings that would lead me to reborn as any of the figures that you describe have been completely transcended, completely seen through. So I am awakened, I'm the enlightened one. Or according to another story, he says, I have no teacher. I have need of no teacher. I've realized the truth, and there is no one like me. A tremendous lion's roar, as it's called in the Buddhist tradition. And Upaka says, well, from what you're saying, you must be one of the liberated ones, one of the conquerors. He said, yes, I'm one of the conquerors. I'm one of the liberated ones. And Upaka says, well, may that be so, friend. And he just walks down a by-road out of the Pali scriptures, never to be seen again. It's a really, really important and interesting story for a number of reasons. First of all, I think there is that sense of the otherness of the Buddha. I think this is really important. So often when we think of the Buddha, we kind of have our own version of the Buddha that we can sort of incorporate into our life and experience. Probably maybe some academic somewhere has written a kind of scholarly work on versions of the Buddha according to changing fashions in society. They will not encompass the Buddha. The Buddha is Lokuttara. The Buddha is from another dimension entirely. So there's that aspect, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. If we don't keep that in mind, then the Dhamma won't be coming from another dimension. Again, we'll just incorporate that into our own conditioning, perhaps even our own prejudices. There's another aspect to the story that I think is very important, and that is that one of the first people the Buddha talks to does not follow him, does not take up the Dhamma. I think this is really significant. No matter how great the Buddha is, it doesn't mean that people will follow him. It's something else that means that you will take up the Dhamma. You have to do it as an individual, from yourself. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha that says a very wonderful line, which I'm fond of quoting, by you must the zealous effort be made. The Buddhas are only proclaimers of the way. By you must the zealous effort be made. So you could have the best teacher in the world, the best teaching available, the most incredible person, but unless you get up and practice yourself and commit yourself to Buddhist practice, nothing will happen. And you're completely free to refuse the Dhamma. As Sangharakshita says somewhere, To be free to be a Buddhist, you need to be free not to be a Buddhist. So that's really, really important. At the end of his proclamation to Upaka, the Buddha says that he's going to Kashi. He's going to the deer park at Kashi. And he's going to beat the drum of the Dhamma. Beat the drum of the deathless. The amata dundubi. The amata dundubi. The drum of the deathless. Dundubi. That's the sound of the drum, isn't it? Dundubi. There must be some drum in ancient Indian tradition, and that's its sound. Dundubi. The drum of the deathless. So we need to really imagine the Buddha walking with the rhythm of the drum of the deathless. The amata dundubi. He's going to beat that drum. He's going to go to the deer park and he's going to beat on that drum of the deathless. What an extraordinary image. The drum of the deathless. What on earth is that? And he's going there to the 5 bhikkhus, the 5 ascetics. Kondanya, Vapa, Badya, Mahanama and Ashvajit. 5 ascetics, 5 tapasyas, 5, in fact, old friends who accompanied him during his period of fearsome asceticism, fearsome austerities, which he gave up, which he rejected because it was a dead end. 6 long years they practiced together with the Buddha at the head, before he was the Buddha, Gautama, at the head of them. It said that his fame as an ascetic rang in the Indian sky like a great bell. He was so famous for his fasting and all the terrible privations that the Indian religious imagination of the time could invent as a way to realise the truth. But he'd rejected that. He'd seen it as a dead end, that it was going nowhere. It was only going to his death. So he took food. He cleaned himself up. He had a realisation, I'll say something about that realisation a bit later, that there was another way, another path that would lead to the deathless. And they left him. They said, Gautama, he's gone to the life of luxury. He's had a bowl of milk rice, the life of luxury. So we'll leave him. And they left him in disgust. But when the Buddha was thinking, reflecting, he'd had the great vision of the potentiality of all of life. That's a great sort of general vision that there will be some that will awaken. He then had to think of specific people. Who's going to get this Dharma? Who's going to really understand it? And he reflected on his 5 old friends. And the reflection is very simple. It's very interesting. They were very helpful to me during that time when in my striving. They were very helpful. They were very supportive. They served me. They were my friends, in other words. So the Buddha feels gratitude towards them. And out of that gratitude, he wants to give them the Dhamma. They helped him. Doesn't matter that they rejected him. He's not thinking about that. They helped him. And because they helped him, they will have some potential. It's not really perhaps any heavy, profound spiritual qualities he's thinking of. He's just thinking of their helpfulness and friendliness. Those of you involved in communicating the Dhamma at our centres, well, don't necessarily look for really profound, wonderful people with all sorts of deep thoughts. Are the people coming along friendly, helpful? Are they, just straightforwardly human, as it were? They will understand. They'll get the Dhamma. So it's then that he's going to the deer park to see, to Isipatana, the landing places of the rishis, where they are in retreat. It's rainy season time. He knows they're there somehow or other, and he's going to beat the drum of the deathless, the amata dundubi, for his old 5 friends. And they see him coming. They see Gautama, who gave up the striving, coming in the distance. And they said, here he comes. Look, he's there. Gautama. Well, he gave it up. He gave up the striving for a life of luxury. We won't pay him homage. We won't pay him homage. We won't bow down. We won't rise up. We won't take his bowl and robe. We'll let him sit with us. We'll do that. But we won't do anything more. But they couldn't help themselves. Either it was something to do with the Buddha's appearance, there was something about him, or that old friendship, that old love resurfacing. They got up. They welcomed him. They bowed down. One took his bowl, one took his robe, one prepared a seat, one brought water. They started to get into conversation, and they were saying, no doubt they were saying, it's good to see you, friend Gautama. It's good to see you again. How are you, friend Gautama? Are you well? They would have gone through all these pleasantries like that. And there's a very interesting moment in this, where they're talking like this. It's all, as it were, going very nicely, as it were. And then the Buddha says, friends, bhikkhus, don't address the Tathagata, the thus come, the one who's come from reality. Don't address the Tathagata as a friend. As friend. The Tathagata is an accomplished one, fully enlightened. Listen, bhikkhus, the deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you. I shall teach you the Dharma. Practicing as you are instructed, by realizing for yourselves here and now, through direct knowledge, you will soon enter upon and abide in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. It's quite a moment. He's really sort of stating something. In other words, he's kind of establishing it's a different relationship. It's a different kind of communication. He's not the same person as he was. Sometimes we can find this, can't we? If we've taken up Buddhist practice and, we go and see some old friends and they kind of relate to us in the same old way. And we have that uneasy moment where we want to sort of say, I'm not that person anymore. We won't probably have the confidence of the Buddha. We might think we're being a bit rude. But he has no embarrassment at all at saying, listen, the deathless has been attained. This is the Tathagata. This is the one who's come from reality. Listen, I'm going to teach you. I'm your teacher now. He hasn't got, it seems, any time to waste. He's cutting straight to what needs to happen. He's really wanting to sort of break through and break in. And they said, well, no, this is not possible. When we were together, you hadn't achieved anything higher. You hadn't done that, and then you gave it up. And the Buddha just kept coming back. He just kept saying, listen, the deathless has been attained. Listen, I will instruct you. I will teach you. And they said, no. You haven't achieved anything higher. You haven't got anywhere. And again, he just kept coming back. Listen, the deathless has been attained. I will instruct you. So really banging on that drum of the deathless. The amata dundubi, again and again. And eventually, he got through. They started to soften. They started to listen to what he had to say about the deathless. And what happened next was that they entered into retreat together. Like I said, it would have been, the Indian month of, I don't know which month it is by the Indian calendar, but July time, the rainy season is still on. So they're there in this lovely, lush parkland of the deer park, and they're in retreat. 2 or 3 of them would go off and beg food for the others, while the Buddha would stay instructing who was left. You get the impression of a very, very intensive retreat. They would have been meditating together, living communally, out in the open, under the trees, with the Buddha communicating, the Buddha beating on the drum of the deathless. Traditionally, it's said that what the Buddha taught, and what I really suppose I ought to be talking about, is the middle way, the Eightfold Path, and the Four Noble Truths. That's what you get in particularly the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. But really, was that what the Buddha actually communicated? Had those teachings really been formulated by that time? Some people have questioned how formulated the Buddha's teaching really was immediately after his enlightenment. And indeed, there is a sutta which just doesn't have any of that. The Aryapariyesana Sutta, which is a very old sutta, it just says that the five realised what the Buddha had realised. It's very, very simple and straightforward. Surely he would have communicated to them the middle way. He would have had to have done that. He would have had to communicate them his great discovery of a way above and beyond the extremes of indulgence in sense pleasures and the extreme of the suffering of asceticism. He would have had to have got that across, because these were gnarly old ascetics. He would have had to say, look, no, that is a dead end. Going through serious physical privation is not going to lead anywhere. He would have had to communicate his great realization. This is the great realization he had not always appreciated, that the pleasure, the bliss, the happiness, the joy, the rapture that arises from concentrated, skillful states, the dhyanas, in other words, that pleasure, that joy, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's really important to dwell in that. That sort of energy, the joyous energy generated through skillfulness is really, really important for your spiritual endeavour, providing you don't get attached to it, providing you see it always as a way to the beyond, as a way to the deathless. There's wonderful descriptions of the Buddha's enlightenment where you see him dwelling in these deeply blissful, ecstatic states, but moving on to wisdom, to seeing, to the deathless, to liberation. In other words, somehow or other, he would have communicated to them that realization of the middle way, which is what we also call the spiral path, the progressive path to liberation, to the deathless, to the amata. Listen, because the deathless has been attained. I will instruct you. Let's hear the Pali words, if I can do them. Odahatta bhikkhave sottam, amatam adigatam. Listen, because the deathless has been attained. I will instruct you. When I imagine hearing those words, when I sit down and think of the Buddha speaking those words, probably not in Pali, probably in a Magadhan dialect. Pali is nearer to it than English, but listen, the deathless has been attained. I feel a thrill. I feel completely thrilled by that. And I don't know why I feel a thrill of that. What is this? What is this deathless? Oh, I know. Oh, that's a synonym for nibbana and enlightenment. I know all that. The deathless, the amata, the undying, the immortal, that which is beyond birth and death, that which is out of time. The amata, the amrita in Sanskrit. The amrita, which is the nectar, the ambrosia of the gods in Indian mythology. Drink this stuff. Drink this deathless nectar and you find eternity. The Buddha is invoking, of course, a very, very powerful and symbol and myth from Indian tradition. He's saying that the liberation that he has realized, the nirvana he has realized here and now is amata, is amrita, is deathless, is ambrosia. Enlightenment nirvana does not die. Not that it is just indefinite, unending time. It's transcended time. It's transcended birth and death. Time in that sense. It's untouched. It's lokuttara, that which is beyond the world. And now he's breaking in on those men. He's breaking in on them with the deathless. He's breaking their shell of ignorance, that which prevents them from opening to the deathless. He's beating that deathless drum, the amata dundubi, dundubi. He wants to break in, and gradually, slowly, the five start to want to break out. There's a wonderful Chan tradition from Master Chin Chin called simultaneous breaking in and breaking out. The mother hen wants to break in through the shell to help the chick get out, and the chick wants to break out. There's mutual breaking in and breaking out. That's what's going on eventually in the deer park. This is supreme communication. This is vital mutual responsiveness, as Sangharakshita calls the communication that happens in the Sangha. Vital mutual responsiveness at the highest possible level. What would have that been like? That amata vacha, that deathless speech, that deathless communication. All we can do is imagine what that communication would be like. We know that the Buddha's communication was very special. We have records of it, not just the content, but the whole way in which he spoke. It's a very rare way of speaking. Beautiful, clear, resonant words that would just fill the assembly and not go beyond the assembly. And words totally attuned to everybody. Everybody in an assembly, when the Buddha was talking, would feel that they were talking to them individually, even though it was for everybody. And it would have all sorts of wonderful tones and shades and timbrings. Sometimes the Buddha's speech is called the Brahma voice, the voice of the god Brahma. Sometimes it's called the lion's roar. It's like that. There's so many wonderful ways in which the Buddha communicates. So many wonderful ideas and practices and images and symbols. There's a lovely story in the Buddha's life where a very old disciple goes to see the Buddha after a very long time, a lay disciple, has a very short conversation with the Buddha, comes away, and Shariputra says, "Friend, your faculties are so bright, so clear, what's happened?" He said, "I've been to see the Buddha. I've been to see the Bhagwan, I've been to see Bhante, and I feel sprinkled with the deathless. I've been sprinkled with the deathless." And wonderful. Amata abhisito, sprinkled, anointed with the deathless, with the ambrosia. It was just a communication about old age, the universality of old age, but there was so much more going on. This man could feel he'd been anointed with the deathless itself, that which is beyond old age. Something in the Buddha's communication was coming through from another dimension. Yes, the words, the content is incredibly important, but far more important, of course, is the presence of the Buddha himself. What more can we say? What can we say about the deathless, the amata, the amrita? Can we say anything at all? Probably best not to, but what comes to my mind when I think of the deathless is the Dhammapada, the section, the first verse of the section on mindfulness. Mindfulness is the way to the deathless. Unmindfulness, the way to death. Those who are mindful do not die, whereas the unmindful are already dead. Mindfulness here is a translation of the word apramada, which can literally non-heedlessness, non-intoxication, but is really vigilant wakefulness, bright, ever-present awareness. The Buddha is the embodiment of apramada. His enlightened consciousness is always fully awake, fully aware pulsing with life and energy, with creative life. Apramada, you could also say, is responsiveness, creative, undying responsiveness. It's the awareness that goes out to create new people, that goes out to create Sangha, spiritual community, through the communication of the deathless, that creates the kingdom of the Dharma. It's infinitely creative in giving people the means that they need individually so that they can activate their own path to the deathless. And the Buddha himself, and Buddhist tradition ever after, employs all kinds of means in order to do this, to get people onto the path of the deathless, to wake up that deathless mindfulness. There are so many ideas, so many concepts. Yes, but Buddhism and the Buddha himself isn't afraid, wants in fact to use the language of symbols and myth. We're in a room surrounded by symbols and images and colour. This is all Dhamma. This is all communicating the deathless. All these images are communicating the nature of the deathless to us in a very, very powerful way, because they're using colour and symbol. Every one of these images is involved with a story, a myth, which is the deepest story and myth of all, the story of enlightened consciousness, liberated consciousness. Not only that, it's not just stories and myths. The Dhamma uses environments, places. This is an environment, a whole environment to practice. The whole place called Padmavajra is a Dhamma teaching. The Dhamma employs or uses worlds to communicate the Dhamma. We have the whole notion of the pure land, the Sakhavati, the happy land, where even the bird song is communicating Dhamma. In the Vimalakirti Desha Sutra, there is a pure land, a Buddha field, a Dhamma kingdom, a kingdom of the Dhamma, where the Buddha, Sarva Gandha Sugandha, or the pure land is called sweetly perfumed with all perfumes. And the Buddha there communicates the Dharma entirely through perfume and scent. And all you have to do is just smell, and you'll be liberated. And this is so extraordinary that the disciples asked the Buddha about this, and the Buddha says, yes, there are Buddha lands where the work of the Buddha is done through communication entirely through light, entirely through the Bodhi tree, entirely through the physical beauty of the Buddha, entirely through the robes of the Buddha, entirely through water, gardens, palaces, mansions, lights in the sky, silence, and so on and on. All these have been used, apparently, in the cosmos to communicate the deathless, to wake people up to the Dharma. Sometimes people complain that in Triratna there's not enough of a range of communication of the Dharma to people. And yes, it's true. Of course it's true. When you look at the range in Buddhist tradition, and the range, if you like, of the Buddhist vision of what can be used to communicate the Dharma, of course we're limited. Actually, we're not as limited as people think. Sangha actually is definitely not limited. Of course, we've got a lot more to do in terms of discovering, creating, finding literal and metaphorical languages to touch people and reach people on the deepest possible level. And we can only do that, not through techniques or anything like that. We can only do that through going for refuge more deeply to the Buddha, so that we can touch the deathless. That's what we've got to do if we want to communicate the Dharma widely. We have to touch the deathless. We have to enter into the deathless and then endlessly pour forth the wonders of the Dharma, using every possible language to touch and to move and to rouse and to instruct the many people, the Bahujana, as the Buddha calls it, the Bahujana, the many people. After the 5 bhikkhus, the 5 friends, woke up and realized the Dhamma, you have a sense after that breakthrough, the Buddha had to work hard with them to get through, but after that, the floodgates just opened. Not long after that, the Buddha had a chance meeting with, a playboy basically, a very self-indulgent young man named Yasha, who was in a state of horror at the life, at the emptiness of the life he was leading, and he sort of just stumbled across the Buddha, running out of his palace, a very self-indulgent kid really. And the Buddha had communicated with him. He wasn't interested in the fact that he was very self-indulgent. He knew at that moment he was going to hear the Deathless. And he got through to him. And Yasha became very fast an enlightened disciple of the Buddha. And then it just took off. Yasha's friends, they all started to join in. Yasha's friends and their families all started to become disciples of the Buddha, so that you have 60, eventually, over 60 arahants, enlightened ones in the world. And just listen to what the Buddha says to them. Bhikkhus, I am free from all fetters, whether human or divine. You are free from all fetters, whether human or divine. Go now and wander for the welfare and happiness of the multitude of people, the Bahujana, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, the welfare of gods and humans. Teach the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the meaning and the letter, with the spirit and the letter. Communicate the sublime life that is utterly perfect and pure. There are creatures with little dust in their eyes who will perish through not hearing the Dhamma. Some will understand the Dhamma. I shall go to Iruvara, to Senagama, to teach the Dhamma. So this is really, really important. This word Bahujana is a very important term. It's usually translated as the many folk, or the multitudes in English translation, but it's an anti-caste term. This is what's important. The Buddha was insistent that the Dhamma was for everybody, and it should be taught in their language, in their vernacular. And he insisted that he was not one of those bad teachers with the acharya muti, the close, tight fist of a bad teacher who holds things back. He taught the Dhamma for everybody. Doesn't matter what their background is, their status is, it's for the Bahujan. So you get this sense, after the Buddha's turning of the wheel of the Dharma to the 5, of a great explosion in northern India, a tremendous arousal of energy and inspiration, with the Dhamma pouring out and spreading throughout the lands. But I've actually got ahead of myself. We need to get back to the Dharma Chakra Pravartana. We need to get back to the point of breakthrough. So whatever the Buddha was teaching to the 5, at a certain point in his communication, Kondanya, one of the 5, Kondanya, had a great realization. He had the realization that whatever was subject to arising is subject to cessation. Whatever begins comes to an end. Whatever arises, passes away, arises, passes away. There is just in life continual arising and passing, and seeing that not just as an idea, seeing it with the eye of the Dhamma, as it's called. The eye of the Dhamma, the eye of truth, the eye of the heart, the eye of reality. Seeing it with that, he woke up. He coincided, as it were, to some extent, with the Buddha's realization of the deathless. This very, very important moment in Buddhist tradition. And it also reminds us of how simple and how direct realization is. How direct and straightforward and concrete insight really is. I remember Bhante once saying how definite it is. You know the truth of the arising and passing of things. He's even said all of Buddhism is in that. All of the Dharma, all of the teachings is in that teaching. The deathless is found in the realization of the arising and passing of everything. When that happened, apparently there were all sorts of invisible beings that were present when the Buddha was teaching the five. All the different orders of gods. When they saw, wow, Kundanya sees. Kundanya's got it. The Dhamma has been taught. The wheel of the Dhamma has been turned. It's only turned when there's that realization. When someone receives it and understands it as the Buddha understands it, then there's just this great shout throughout the cosmos. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Throughout the cosmos. The cosmos is sort of vibrating. Because this is a cosmic event, it means that the way of liberation is open to everybody, to all of us. So the gods are glad. The universe is glad at this. And the Buddha himself realizes, he knows that Kundanya knows, and he is completely inspired. He lets forth at that moment an udana, an ecstatic utterance. It's a very simple utterance. It's simply, Kundanya knows. Kundanya knows. He's just celebrating Kundanya's knowing. And that's how Kundanya came to be called thereafter. Anyata Kundanya. Kundanya knows. Because the Buddha just says, Kundanya knows. And you can feel the delight, the inspiration in the Buddha when he says, Kundanya knows. It's at this moment, this joyous moment, that the Dharma Chakra Pravartana happens. The wheel of the Dharma is turned. The foundation of the kingdom of righteousness has started. The Dharma revolution is in town. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Padmavajra, fantastic talk, and just a really strong evocation of the Dharma in the sense of bringing to life the historical events surrounding that first communication, like you said, the beginning of that Dharma revolution, but also just the way you evoked the otherness and the mystery and the wonder of that. It's just absolutely fantastic, the Deathless and the drum of the Deathless, and just a reminder, if we needed it, of why this really is something to celebrate, because it is that kind of magical, mysterious and wonderful, those events all those years ago, and what broke in to the world, broke into time and space at that time as well. So thank you for a fantastic talk. Yeah. So just a couple more things before we go into the break. So first of all, if you have got questions, I think questions have been coming in during the talk itself, but if you've got any more that you want to send us, then do write those down now and send them in, and we'll ask Padmavajra some questions after the break. And we'll have a break for 15 minutes and come back in to the shrine room, those of us who are here, for 11:45, and that's when we'll begin the question and answer session, and we'll go to about 12:30 depending on how many questions we've got. So a 15-minute break, but before we do that, just two more things. I'd like to invite Satyakirti to come up and to tell us something about ways in which you can give to Padmaloka. And while he's coming up and we do the changeover, just another round of applause for Padmaloka. Okay. Um, hello everyone, and good morning. I hope you've really benefited from Padmavajra's talk. I hope you feel completely uplifted and inspired. I hope you feel you have direction, purpose and meaning in your life. I mean, I've sort of been thinking about this in the past few days, and it just seems to be growing stronger and stronger. But what we have as Buddhists is absolutely incredible. It is completely phenomenal. We have the Buddha, the enlightened one, sort of striding forward ahead of us in his golden robes, ablaze with light, or as perhaps as Padmavajra said, slightly mucky looking robes. But we have a path that leads us beyond anything we could ever imagine. Unending freedom, unshakable serenity, boundless and blazing love. And we have the Sangha, our precious fellowship of friends, brothers and sisters, practicing together and moving towards enlightenment. So isn't this just absolutely phenomenal? I can't put enough words to that really. Are we not blessed? Are we not the luckiest people in this world? I would, without a moment's hesitation say yes, with a deep, resounding yes, in fact. And in the time we're in, and the time we've been in for the past few months, with the flaws of the world becoming so much more manifest in our lives, we have these three jewels, we have these three things, these refuges, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. And our objective as practitioners of this noble way is to bring these great values, these great ideals into the world, to manifest and body forth them into the world, so they can bring this other way, this greater path to all that they encounter. And this is what we do when we meditate, when we worship, or when we study the Dharma, when we practice generosity, when we train in ethics. We become more like Buddhas. And the world needs this. It so desperately needs this. And this is what our movement is about. This is what Padmaloka is about. And this is what all the institutions around the movement are about. And, it's another thing I've sort of been reflecting on this time is just that, our movement, it's a relatively new movement, but again, we have so much. You've just borne witness to this incredible talk by Padmavajra. I feel personally blessed to live with people like him and others like him here on the ordination team. But I know throughout our movement we have order members, we have wise men, wise women that we can train with, we can learn with, we can benefit so much from. So today I would like you to consider two things. One of two things, or perhaps both, up to you. The first is to create a Buddha tile. So this shrine room is filled with the depictions of enlightenment, from the blazing wrathful to the sublimely peaceful. And these images engage our imagination and can awaken our dormant spiritual energies. They are portals to the beyond. I think Arvid did a little bit of a pan round as we started, and maybe we'll do a bit more later, but you can see it's such a rich place to be in. And you can take part in it. So you can order a Buddha tile from our website, make a donation, and we will send it to you in the post to paint. And once you've completed it and sent it back, we will at some point put it up on the walls of the shrine room to form a realm full with the images of enlightenment, full of Buddhas. And do not underestimate the effect that this can actually have on you doing this, because it's sort of, you're familiarizing yourself with the forms of enlightenment. That really goes into the mind, on the conscious and unconscious levels. So do really consider it. The second option I'd like you to think about is, if you prefer and can afford to do so, is simply to make a donation through our website. These donations will all go towards aiding our ability to train
individuals in taking up this great path more fully in their lives and bringing it into the world. The links to do both will be available below the video, and we'll also post them in the comments section, so you can have a look at these during the tea break whilst you're also thinking about questions for Padmavajra. But whatever you choose to do, whether it's painting a Buddha tile or making a donation through our website, or neither of these, whatever you choose, make sure that you take Padmavajra's words to heart. Make sure you take the Buddha's words to heart and partake in this great vision. Bring enlightenment into this world. Make it real in yourself and in all those around you. Okay, thank you. So, as Padmasagara said, we'll go on a tea break now and we'll be starting again at 12 o'clock. Quarter to.
you. Okay, are we ready to start back? Okay, good. Well, thank you again, Padmavajra, for the talk. And Chris told me that there were over 200 people. I can't remember exactly how many he said, but
232.
how many?
232.
232 people listening to the talk. So that was great. And there are lots of questions, so I've got various things to ask you, just to say a little bit more about. There's kind of a range of questions touching on slightly different themes. Some of them asking you more about the text and the language used by the Buddha. Some of them asking us about how to practice some of the things you're talking about, and others more about your own experience and that kind of thing in your own communication. So we'll try and cover those different areas, I think, in the next half an hour or so. So first of all, we had some questions about the deathless itself. So from Nivaya, we had the question, you said that the deathless is beyond time, and please could you say a bit more about that? But there's a linked question as well that you might like to take with it, which is on the Buddha being from another dimension entirely, as she puts it. The question of Pirita said that can feel quite distant and out of reach. So in that case, how do we still relate to the Buddha? So a couple of related questions there.
I mean, as to the first, about the deathless being out of time, in a way, I don't know if I can answer it, to be really honest. It's certainly a language that you find throughout the Buddhist tradition of, you get it in the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, that the Buddha is searching his noble quest. His asana, quest is too weak a translation for Pariyesana. It's this intensely desiring search for the truth. It's for the unborn, the unailing, the unaging, the deathless, the uttermost security from the bond. So it's something which is completely untouched and outside of the ravages of time and impermanence. That's what he's searching for. That's what he's looking for. And in a sense, it's not really explained. It's not really kind of gone into. It's certainly not going to a kind of heaven. I mean, that sort of notion is completely rejected. You know, it's not a there, neither is it a here. I think one of the reasons why I like this language is important for me is that I think that sometimes the way enlightenment can be presented is that, it's a state of mind. You know, and of course, in a sense, that's true. The Buddha completely transforms his consciousness. But the trouble is, the way people interpret that is in terms of, I just need to do a little bit of, technological manipulation. I'm enlightened. And there's no real change. Whereas the language of the amata, the deathless, that which is outside of all this, is really making it clear that, nirvana in the end is a profound mystery. And the enlightened ones are profoundly mysterious. So, in a way, I'm not really answering your question, Nibara. I'm just sort of saying why I think that language is really important. That sort of sense of that which lies outside of, all of the sort of ravages of impermanence and dukkha and insubstantiality. It's very, very important to have that. Otherwise, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha wouldn't be refugees. They wouldn't be refugees. But it's not something that's sort of, just going on forever in the sense of unlimited time. It's quite different sort of dimension of things. Yeah.
So just with the second question then about this, the otherness of that dimension, and it's hard to get your head around, isn't it? It's, like you say, it's not just indefinitely long period of time either. So the question we had was that can feel a little bit distant, or it's hard to then relate to that. So are there ways that we can relate more to that sense of mystery and the unknown?
I must admit, I've come across this question before. I mean, it's obviously something, quite a few times actually, the whole notion of, we use the phrase, the transcendental, the lokuttara, because sometimes people, I had a correspondence with somebody recently who was saying, well, there isn't any transcendental in Buddhism. Well, transcendental is a translation of lokuttara, that which is beyond the loka, all of the sort of levels of the wheel of life. That is definitely present in Buddhism. That is what the Buddha has realised, that he's beyond all conditionings. Interestingly enough, for myself, I've never found that sort of alienating. I've always found that thrilling, like the language of the Deathless, and like the otherness of the Buddha. I find that profoundly attractive, far from thinking in terms of I can't reach that and that puts me off. It's more that I want to go in that direction because that's so beyond what I am. I have a sort of sense of adventure, I suppose. Sometimes people ask me why I got involved with the Dharma so young, and you could just boil it down to, this is the most adventurous thing I could possibly do. And it's about going into the unknown. And of course that does mean there's something in me that wants to realise the unknown. But if you're put off by that sort of language, if you like, of the otherness and so on, well, all you need to do is sort of bring to mind the Buddha's kindness. The Buddha's kindness and compassion. You just need to think of Ananda, when the Buddha was entering parinirvana, weeping, and his comment was not on the Buddha's transcendence, it was on he who is so kind. He who is so kind, my teacher. He who is so kind. And Ananda had enormous reverence and devotion to the Buddha, and knew the otherness of the Buddha, but what he remembered was the kindness. So I think if you find the language of the beyond, alienating, as it were, just think, the Buddha is incredibly kind. I mean, imagine a really kind person, the kindest person you know, and multiply that by 100,000 or infinity. That's the Buddha's kindness. Unfailing kindness all the time. Well, that becomes very attractive because they're going to reach out to you, that kind of kindness. And we have some kindness in ourselves, so we can respond, to that kindness because we have it and we can develop it. Yeah.
Just a sec, guys. I'm just going to move the microphone very quickly.
Okay. So a brief interlude.
There we go.
Is that so that people can hear my question?
That's right.
I'll try to speak at the same sort of volume as Padmavajra as well.
Difficult. I've got a loud voice.
Well, I'm quiet and you're loud. So. Okay, so the next question, just related to that point about you finding the Deathless so attractive and having that sense of adventure. Dharma Mai asked the question, please could you say a bit more about how to open to beauty and allow that to guide us in a safe way rather than becoming attached to the things that we find beautiful.
Thank you, Dharma Mai. It's nice to think of you listening to a Dharma talk on Dharma Day. Beauty, opening to beauty. Opening to beauty and not in an attached way. Well, I think perhaps the clue to this is metta. Perhaps the clue to this is loving kindness. Loving kindness traditionally is said to lead to a liberation called the beautiful, the Shuddha. Apparently when you do the metta bhavana, you should really, not just develop loving kindness to people and wish them well, you're developing, this is something that Bhante's talked about, a profound appreciation, even an aesthetic appreciation of everybody, including your enemy. So you're really dwelling on that. You're seeing people as they are in themselves. That's the meaning of aesthetically. And love lights up, doesn't it? When you're in a state of loving kindness, even if you're just in a good mood, everything sort of changes around you, and beauty is sort of around you. Traditionally, this is in the Pali Canon, this is the Buddha's teaching, that when you do the metta bhavana at the end, when you've generated metta to all beings, you should say a sort of mantra. You should say, Subhani, Subhani. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. And if you're really in touch with that, you enter this liberation called the beautiful. And it's said in this liberation, everything is beautiful. So I think if you're, and beauty is very, very important in life. We must sort of observe that, because beauty enriches, it creates very, very positive and pleasurable emotions in us, and that's really important, a real tonic to our system. But if you're doing that with metta, if the ground of that is metta, and really looking for aesthetic appreciation in everybody and everything, then I think you're on very safe ground. You don't have to be too concerned about getting attached. If you notice some attachment to someone or something, well, just immediately widen. Just immediately widen the range of loving kindness. Don't dwell exclusively on that beautiful person, who maybe you're getting attached to. Just a little bit with them, just to maybe spark you up, just half a minute or something, and then, spread it around, to everybody, and see everybody with that eye of beauty. See the beautiful everywhere. Yeah. So I think metta is the key.
Just with the, you talk about metta, we've had a question as well from Karunadi about the current times that we're in, and the divisions within society. And how do we open more to the deathless? This was a question, how do we open more to the deathless in a time of division like the one that we're currently in? So I wonder if that's in the same kind of area, or if you want to say a bit more about that.
Well, in a way, I would say that in these times, we have to open to the deathless even more. I mean, I really felt that when the lockdown started and, the world started to get perilous. My instinct, I have to say, was to want to go for refuge more deeply. As if the reliability in the world was well, the world is not reliable, never has been, never will be. It's the nature of it. It's very, very shaky indeed. And my instinct initially was, no, I've really got to go to a different level, first and foremost, before it's not before I do anything else. It's not that you don't want to reach out, but this is a very unreliable and perilous situation, and one has to find something of real security, which you can only find, in the Dharma, in moving towards the deathless, something of real substance that you're relying on. So I would argue that Buddhists need to do two things at this time. They need to be much more strongly withdrawing into the deathless, where there needs to be a lot more renunciation. I think particularly renunciation of views and dogmas which are not examined, and I think renunciation of aversion and craving and attachment, and renunciation of conceit. The Buddha in the Attained Sutta talks about the dart nestling in the heart. The dart nestling in the heart. And it's that dart, that thorn, that drives people into quarrelling with one another. It's an amazing sutta, the Attained, because Attained means the taking up of the stick, embracing violence. And it's the way the Buddha talks about, it's the way he talks about why he went forth. And it's all about seeing the terrible conflict between people. People become frightened because they arm themselves. They arm themselves with views. They arm themselves with weaponry. But the weaponry are also, dogmas and opinions and views and stances in relation to one another. This is all to do with the thorn in the heart. And what Buddhists have got to do is remove that thorn. We've really got to get down to serious spiritual practice and have the humility to acknowledge that we don't have the answers that we think we ought to have, and that other people think we ought to have. What we have is the answer in the sense of removing that dart, that thorn of dogma, prejudice, aversion, attachment that causes all the problems in the world. And what we need to do, yes, if we're going to speak out and do something, we need to be speaking from a heart which is removing that thorn, or even remove that thorn, that isn't coming from that. So I think there needs to be two things for us. There needs to be withdrawal and engagement. Withdrawal in the sense of really doing everything we can to pull away from, the thorn in our heart, or remove the thorn in our heart, and a really intelligent engagement with people, with all people, which is profoundly ethical. Dr. Ambedkar, I've been thinking about Dr. Ambedkar today and his teaching on Dhamma is morality, morality is Dhamma. And by morality he means the direct necessity for human beings to love other human beings. He says that morality takes the place of God in Buddhism. And it's sacred and universal. And it's for everybody. It's for all occasions, and it's the most holy thing. That's where we need to be coming from. Seeing absolutely everybody with that kind of ethic, with that kind of Dharma. And the only way I can do that is to really work on my heart, really work on removing the thorn within the heart, and really making sure that whoever I'm with, whoever I'm talking to, I'm really taking them in as a human being, as a person. I mean, Dr. Ambedkar was also very fond of, our friends in India, especially if they're Marathi speakers, will know this very well. He's very fond of this word manuski, human beingness. Human beingness. It's another anti-caste term. You don't see the caste, you don't see the race, you see the human being. That is the morality we're talking about. You see the human being before you see anything else. That's who the Buddha saw. And he saw the human being before seeing anybody else, precisely because he was coming from the deathless, because he'd completely lost all egotism, all ditty, all view, all conceit, all arrogance, all tendency to compare himself with others. Yeah, so I hope that's helpful.
It's a really high ideal, isn't it, to see people in that kind of way, with that kind of clarity all the time. I guess we're all doing that as a practice within a Sangha, is trying to see each other more as individuals and more of that humanness. And just thinking about you and what you do here in terms of helping men train for ordination and seeing lots of them over the years. Presumably it's something you've had to develop, that capacity to communicate to people as individuals. And we had a question from Kusala Devi about how you actually are able to do that. So when you meet an individual, what is it that gives you a sense of how to communicate to them, where they are in particular, so that each person might catch it, so to speak, in terms of understanding the Dharma?
I don't know if I can answer. It's very hard to answer that question. I sort of don't. First of all, I'm sort of aware of sort of failings, I suppose. It's a striving to see everybody as an individual, because, I do have that sort of attitude sometimes of, the beginning of a retreat. Just to be really honest, we're not sort of saints at Padmavajra, and those of you who know us know that we're not saints out there. But sometimes at the beginning of a retreat, going for refuge retreat, and here we go again, there's lots of people arising. And by the way, we really miss people coming on retreat here. It's really horrible that we can't have people here. But at the beginning, sometimes you think, I don't like the look of him. Oh, come on. I've got him in my study group, and so on and so forth. And of course, that's all mental rubbish. It's all prejudice. It's all sort of, weird kind of conceit and self-view. I mean, you also have the other, I like the look of him. That's going to be a really good communication. When you get together, it doesn't go so well. And I think the training is to ignore it. That's all mental fluff. You know, you've really just got to ignore all that kind of reactivity, all that laziness and conditioning. Don't get into it and be with people as they are. It's a fantastic training, actually, to learn how to communicate with the range of people. I've learned so much from living here at Padmavajra, because I'm with people, especially on retreats, who I wouldn't ordinarily choose to be with. And I've learned so much about life because of that. And the practice is to be with them. That's the first thing. You know, so if I was to sort of model what happens, the first thing is that you've got to be together. I remember Bhante, when he used to do Kalyana Mitra ceremonies, he used to say, in the ceremony itself, he'd never go on in a very sort of ecstatic way about the nature of Kalyana Mitrata. He'd just say, and you need to meet regularly. And it's not enough to email or telephone. You need to meet, you need to be together. Everything comes from that. So the first thing is being together. You're being together. It doesn't matter what you feel. You know, you might, you know, sometimes I go to a study group, I'm not in a good mood. That's irrelevant. That's totally irrelevant. It's got nothing to do with anything. You go there, you're with them, you communicate, and as you communicate, the mood changes, you tune in much more to them. And I think the other thing is to maintain as much as possible, or even develop curiosity. Curiosity. I come from a family that's incredibly sort of nosy, so I've got my sort of family conditioning. You know, my mum and my sisters and my dad come to that. They want to know about everybody. You know, if you went to my, you know, if you went, you know, when I used to take friends home, they were a little bit shocked because mum and dad and my sisters, they want to get in there. They want to know all about you. They want to know about your family. They want to know about what you do. They want to know as many details as possible. So I've got a sort of family conditioning to really want to get to know people. So it's not something I've sort of really developed. And, you know, but it has sort of changed, I think, because the beautiful thing about the Sangha is, you know, there are just lots of people who want to meet with you, who you are thrown together with. So you start getting a much, much wider vision of human life. And one of the things that we do here, and I think this is important, I hope I'm answering your question, Kusala Devi. I'm sort of going off, aren't I, as I do. But one of the brilliant things we do here, you know, I've talked about at various times, you know, you see the person. And within the Sangha, you know, you forget about your conditioning, you know, you're there with each other. Now, sometimes it's very important to talk about our past. And even to talk about the sufferings of our past, even the injustices that we've suffered in our past. One of the beautiful, best things we do here is telling our life stories on going for refuge retreats. You know, if it's a 10 Pillars retreat, people tell their ethical history. If it's spiritual friendship retreat, they tell their friendship history, or they'll tell the journey of their going for refuge. And you get the most extraordinary stories. I mean, I've heard the most amazing stories. But the thing is, they're told within an incredible context. People get very concerned these days about safe spaces. Well, the safest space is where the refuges are. The safest space is where the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha are. And one of the things I found in those life stories, people have told things which at times have been quite horrific. What they've suffered or what they've got up to. But somehow it's taken up, because after the life story we come in here and we do a puja. It's sort of taken up and it's sort of transformed into something else. So I think there's a kind of alchemy that goes on within the spiritual community. This is what I'm sort of searching for, I think, in communication with people. There's an alchemy where you can hear anything, you can tell anything, providing you're willing to kind of offer it up to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, providing it's in the context of that transcendence, providing in the end it's in that context of forgiving, letting go, opening up, apologising, confessing. Then what starts to happen is grace. I think a real grace and blessing happens when you have that communication. So I think the reason why I love communicating with people and tuning into people is because of those moments. You know, and you can't force them. They don't sort of happen every day, but those moments where you're suddenly into a space where you're with someone totally different from you, very, very different background, and there's this profound resonance and understanding. They know that you know what they're saying, and you know that they know what you're saying. There is that mutuality of knowing, and there's an incredible grace there, whatever the content. Extraordinary.
Yeah, thank you. You said there about being from a nosy family and being interested in people and what they do and all the rest of it. Well, a few of the questions are of that kind of nature with regard to yourself. So people wanted to know more about you and your personal experience. So one of them was if you remember the first time you communicated the Dharma to somebody and they got it. And what was that like for you?
Oh gosh.
That was Edward's question in Sheffield.
The first time I communicated the Dharma and they got it. Gosh.
Or a significant occasion when that happened.
It's a very hard question to answer, actually. I suppose partly the difficulty in answering that question is that we're not like the Buddha communicating to Kundanya, where there's that incredible sort of clarity of awareness and that real love and compassion for others. You have to imagine the Buddha is so absolutely egoless, highly attuned to what's going on. So he knows that they know. And his communication of Dharma is totally pure because he is the Dharma. Well, I'm not like that. Nowhere near that. I'm an enthusiast. I'm an enthusiast. I just love the Dharma. There's something about the Dharma that, when getting a chance to communicate the Dharma, something happens. I don't know why. So I'm an enthusiast, and all I want to do is to share enthusiasm. And if people get enthusiastic and want to, practice the Dharma, that makes me doubly happy. I've had a chance to get enthusiastic and talk about what I love. They've been sparked off and they love it. And well, there's been a lot of occasions, I think, where that's happened. But that sort of quality of the Buddha has with Kundanya, I can't recall anything like that, I must say. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know, because you also get this weird thing where somebody comes up to me sometimes and said, in 19 something or other, or 20, you said, and it sounds incredible what I said. Absolutely. This is not unusual. And my older member friends here are shake, nodding. They've had this experience. You said this, and I think, God, I couldn't have said that. That's too clear. That's too clear. That's too good. Did I really say that? Or, you said that and it changed my life. Really? Well, that's sort of staggering. I take that to mean that's just the magic of the Dharma. That's the magic of the Dharma.
I was just thinking, I had an example myself from Vivekaratna, who stayed with us last year, was it, or the year before, from India. And he talked about his time in India and meeting you for the first time. So it is, I think, a case where somebody else might be able to answer that question more than you can. And I remember him describing that first encounter with you, and he said that up until that point he'd met bhikkhus in India, but there'd always been a very strong monastic and lay divide, and he hadn't been able to relate to them enough to ask questions and receive the kind of replies that he wanted. But he said when he came to see you, you immediately welcomed him, sat him down, made him a cup of tea, and just that hospitality and that kindness. I remember him saying that really communicated something very strongly to him, not just about you, but about what it was that you are enthusiastic about and how you actually embodied that and live that out. So maybe using his example, that goes some way to
Yeah, that's
answering
yes.
the
Yeah, I
question.
do remember that. I do remember him coming along. Yeah, and I was in robes at that time. It was in Anagarika. Yeah.
Then we've had a couple of questions. One from Padmavajra. Can you describe the deathless in your own experience? And also from Ashvajit. When and how for you did the door to the deathless open?
Well, let's take Ashvajit first. Hello, Ashvajit. Lovely to hear from you. Very old friend, Ashvajit, because Ashvajit was there, one of the great order members, still even greater order member now. When I first came along in Brighton, Ashvajit was one of my Kalyana Mitras. I don't know if you remember this, Ashvajit, but I remember you leading study for the Brighton Mitras up in that library in the attic room at the centre on where Buddhism begins and why it begins there. Bante's essay on dukkha. And I remember that being... I don't know what you were taking at the time. No, you were taking the Dharma. That's all right. But that was an incredible study group. I mean, your clarity of teaching and the way you sort of dug into the text was really, really good, and it really made me want to read and study that particular text. So that was definitely a moment, I think, in my own journey on the way to the deathless, or certainly taking up the path of the Dharma. But I think there's certainly in terms of spiritual community, spiritual friendship. I got involved in Brighton. There was Buddhadasa who led my first class, and I suppose the big turning point for me was that there'd been a number of events, leading up to that, which I won't go into here. That would take too long, which I've been reflecting on a bit lately, but it was really doing the puja. Buddhadasa, my first class was a full-length Metabhavana, a sevenfold puja, and thank goodness it wasn't, a very gentle, beginner's meditation. I wanted the magic, and I wanted that sense of wonder and the sacred, and there was that sort of, particularly the mantras at the end. As those mantras faded away into the silence, that sense of something vast and unending that I was sort of opening to. So that's a very, very important moment for me in my, journey to taking up the path of the Dharma. And I did feel this sort of quiet joy that I knew I was going to devote myself to the Dharma. I even weirdly knew I was going to be an order member, even though I'd only met Buddhadasa that day. But I just sort of knew somehow or other. So I think those are very important experiences, very formative experiences in Brighton back in 1974, something like that. Gosh, the experience of the deathless, I'm not sure I can say, because I think that would be making a claim. If I were to say, this has been the amateur moment, because amateur is synonymous with nirvana and with vimukti. It's that which lies above and beyond. But perhaps there is a little something which isn't a personal experience. It's more like a very important symbol for me that I meditate on daily, which I find enchanting and fascinating and keeps me on the path. It's every day I meditate on Padmasambhava, and in his lap he holds a skull bowl. We've got one up here, you can't see it, a skull bowl filled with amrita. So you've got this skull bowl, which of course is the symbol of shunyata, of impermanence, of death even. And in it you've got this bubbling amrita, this amrita nectar, the deathless nectar. And I find that a very, very important symbol. So it's not a sort of direct experience and realization of the deathless, but it's more this sort of sense of, sometimes, it's sort of presented very vividly to me, the necessity of meditating on impermanence, meditating on my own mortality, and also opening up to the boundless, creativity of the Dharma life, that's what I think is sort of going on there, and the great bliss that goes with that. So it's not any kind of attainment or anything like that. It's more a very important symbol in my daily practice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we're coming up to the last few minutes of the session. There's just one more question or request to say more about something, and that's about Upaka, who you mentioned as being the person that the Buddha meets on the road and takes that by path and disappears. And the Dharmajit was just asking, could you say more about the significance of that? Or I guess we could extend that just to say, how do we avoid that? You talked and evoked the deathless, and it's good to feel inspired, but how do we actually move towards that more fully in our lives progressively and not slip off on a side road?
Well, in a way, I think it's just asking the question is very good. Just asking the question. It's often said that many start, the life, but few continue and few finish it. You remember that story from Bante's early wandering days when he and his friend are with that great saint Ram Dass and down in South India, and they asked him why few people, in a way, finished the spiritual life, as it were. That they started but they gave it up. And he said, well, they don't have a clear idea of the goal, and they don't have a clear idea of how to get there. And perhaps that's the problem with poor old Upaka. He's very impressed. He can sort of see, in a sense, the goal. It's there before him, and he is very impressed by it. But he neglects the way, that there is a means to get there. And so I think some accounts say that he was a sort of expert in signs. He was a reader of sort of the signs that people showed that they were saints. But in a sense, you could almost say he was a spiritual voyeur. He just wanted to kind of go round and admire the saints, but not really take up the path. And you do get people like that. They sort of flit from one tradition to another, one teacher to another, but they never really get down to the hard work of practice. And the thing is, you have to tell yourself, you have to remind yourself that it is a long journey, the Dharma life, and it's not always an easy journey, because you're being challenged at a very deep level, and it's very, very easy to be impressed. To be strongly impressed at the beginning of your Dharma life. You can be very strongly impressed, moved by spiritual friends, very, very uplifted. Yes, I've discovered it now, I'm going to do it now. But the sticking power is the staying power is something else. There's a difference, if you like, between the devotee and the disciple. The devotee, the bhakta, admires, and can sort of look up and celebrate. The disciple can do that, but the disciple can also follow. They want to realise what that person is teaching. They're not just impressed by the outer form. They want to know how that person has got there. And that's what you have to just keep reminding yourself, that the Buddha teaches. He teaches not to be admired. He's not bothered about being admired or revered. He teaches so that people practice, so that people do what he did, so that people follow his teaching. And that's what we have to remember, particularly when it's difficult. Particularly when it's difficult, because at those times, you can think, it's just not working, it's not worth it. But those are the best times. In a sense, those difficult times, you learn more about yourself. You learn much, much more about your reactions, about your negative habits and so on. And then, that's when you need to work. Dilgo Khyentse says, doesn't he, that the times of difficulty should actually clarify your practice. They clarify where you are. They clarify where your refuge is when things are really difficult. What are you turning to? So just remember that. And the only way to avoid going off on a byroad is, it's classic Buddhist practice. Ethics, meditation, wisdom. It's the same old. Meeting spiritual friends, working for the Dharma. There's no special trick here. It's you keep doing it day after day.
Okay, well, thank you. We're just coming up to time now. So it has felt like a real treat, not just having such a fantastic talk, but also to hear you say more and to respond to people's questions. So I'd just like to thank you again for the talk, but also for the question and answer session and bringing out more. Yeah, so let's just have another round of applause. So then I'm sure everybody looks happy in the room, so I'm sure we are inspired by everything that Padmavajra's had to say, and I hope that everybody who's joined us online has been inspired, not just inspired, but also ready now to kind of pick up the gauntlet that Padmavajra just laid down and keep treading that path and keep practicing ethics, meditation, wisdom, and all the rest of it. And do join us for the rest of the day, so keep coming along for today. So at 4 o'clock is the next session, and we'll be in here and we'll have the recitation of the shorter Sakavati Vyuha Sutra. So Padmavajra mentioned in his talks that the Dharma has been communicated in all different ways, not just through concepts, but also through images and myths and stories. And the Sakavati Vyuha Sutras really communicate the Dharma through that medium, through images and through myths. So we'll have an opportunity to explore that form of communication of the Dharma this afternoon. So that's at 4 o'clock, and then we have the puja at 8:15. So do come and join us for both of those events. Okay, so we'll finish there.
Great.